The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. Hello and welcome to the Art Beat on KLZK FM 105.7. Happy weekend to you all. I'm your host, Peter Martins, coming to you from the Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. And I have as my special guest this weekend, Angela Mariani Smith, professor in the School of Music in the musicology area. Hello there.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And this actually marks a bit of a special moment, I will say, in the Art Beat here on KLZK, because Dr. Mariani, you are the first official repeat guest we've ever had on the show.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, and it is happening right at the year anniversary of the beginning of the show.
Wow.
So I guess it's interesting to note that we've actually gone a full year without repeating a guest, which kind of shows the richness and how many people are involved in all the events and things we do in the College of Visual and Performing Arts. So anyway, thank you for marking this special occasion, even if you didn't know that it was such.
Well, thank you.
So we're talking today about one of the hats you wear, which is the leader of an ensemble in the School of Music, a student ensemble. I think is it considered a medium ensemble in the parlance?
Yes. It's
okay.
Technically a medium ensemble.
Okay. All right. And this is the Historical Performance Ensemble.
Yes.
All right. And this is comes out of a tradition that's been around for decades, really, in music, historically informed performance, which I always was amused that the acronym of that was HIP, because it seemed maybe sometimes the opposite of its acronym. But you might correct me on that.
Well, it's funny, that particular term was kind of adopted when people decided that the term authentic was neither accurate or authentic.
Okay.
The idea that there could be an authentic performance of something from the 16th century is pretty dubious. There's so many factors in there that we can never know.
Sure.
The farther back you go, the truer that is. People in this particular field started talking about, well, it's informed by history.
Okay.
So it's historically informed performance. Now, full disclosure, apologies to my historical performance colleagues, I've always had a little bit of a problem with it.
Okay.
Because to me, there's an implication that other musical performance is not informed. So I'm not 100%, on board with that term, but it is widely used.
Gotcha.
To mean
Okay.
with performance that's done with a certain amount of historical research into what instruments might have been used, what it might have sounded like in its original context, where it would have been played, what kind of techniques were used, how did they use their instruments, how did they play, musical ornaments or all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
which might be quite different from the way we were approaching it earlier in the 20th century.
Right.
So yeah, that's basically what it is. I like to think of it as imagining, if you were suddenly, in a time machine or something, imagining what it really sounded like, what it might have sounded like.
In its original performance or original venue. Yeah.
I mean, we'll never know what Bach intended. I love that. The intentions of the composer. It's very,
Right.
We'll never know what he intended, but I'm really curious about what he heard. When he went into a rehearsal or when he was doing a performance, what did he hear?
Right.
Right. That seems really interesting to me.
And I remember, 25 years ago, there was kind of a big fight about how big his choir was at the Thomaskirche in Leipzig. And that was where there was a lot of interesting evidence brought to bear that I think, to my mind, the evidence weighed in favor of a much smaller choir than we would have thought, and definitely smaller than what we use today, which, again, doesn't, as to your point, doesn't mean that is how we should always, force everybody to experience Bach. Just like I've always waited for this historically informed performance where the audience is forced to be put into the 16th century or whatever century it is mold, where that you're given a very uncomfortable seat to sit in. You're given some body lice to have during the concert. I mean, all these things that people would have had in these previous centuries to really make it authentic. I really want full authenticity here.
I think you've moved into the realm of Civil War reenactors.
There you go.
Sleeping in the snow or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
What the Society for Creative Anachronism, is there that
sure.
group as well? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you're saying that historical performance does not go to those sorts of possibly extreme lengths to.
It depends. I don't think. Well, no, the performers don't necessarily decide to give themselves the Black Plague or something. No, but we think about it.
Sure.
And we think about what the audiences were hearing and what they were experiencing. And sometimes if there's a contradiction in there, because if we really want your audience to be receiving the music in the same way that their audience might have been receiving the music, you can't do it and in a way that you're imagining exactly what they would have heard, because different things are funny to our audiences now.
True enough.
Different things are offensive. Oh gosh, we run into that all the time with early music.
Yeah.
Because the audience is different. You've got this contradiction. You want to hear what the music actually sounded like, but it's almost impossible to have the same
effect
reaction from the audience.
Yeah. I can see
So
that.
there's thinking about the technique and all of this kind of stuff, but there's also thinking about reception, and that really kind of blows the door wide open to other sorts of things.
Yeah, that's probably the area that it's most fraught, I guess,
Yeah.
right? So maybe we focus on we have, evidence from art history. That's always fascinating to me about, they used this kind of bow and they held their instruments in this way that we don't hold them anymore. Those sorts of things are perhaps easier to to replicate and bring to a modern audience.
Yes, and I think that's what we first started hearing is, Baroque orchestras and things like this, where the music does sound different when it's played on those instruments. And that was very appealing to people, the whole thing. But, you get a problem like, okay, I'm going to do this concert of medieval music and I'm going to sing through these couple of troubadour songs. So you've got God knows how many verses of this actually rather amazing lyric that happens to be an old Occitan, And there's no way your American audience, unless there's an unusual scholar of old Occitan in the audience, is going to know. So they're looking at their program notes.
Sure.
So, or they're looking at the screen where you've got the translation, and that which happens in opera too.
Right.
So that there's that one link away, there's that one step away that's really different from having a musical storyteller, as it were, delivering something directly to you. Now, you can say, well, I'm just going to translate this into English, but it loses, in many cases, the craft that was used to make the melody fit the words in the original language gets lost.
Right.
And then sometimes it sounds great and sometimes it sounds not great. So,
like many operas and even things like the Brahms Requiem, for instance, who the composer himself translated into English, and I don't find that as nearly as compelling, I guess, as even though it's easier to understand. Yeah,
right.
To your point. Well, speaking of storytelling, let's talk about the concert that's coming up here right away on Monday, March 2nd, that the Historical Performance Ensemble is putting on, or parts thereof.
Yeah, this is something really unusual that we're doing with our opportunity to be in Hemley, which is just sounding so wonderful, and the acoustics in there are so great. We have actually two concerts that are coming up, and we have the March 2nd one, and then we have another one in April, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the one that's coming up Monday night is unusual in that I discovered that there were a lot of people in the ensemble who were also working on early music pieces, Baroque pieces especially, on their own, either with their, applied teachers or on their own or whatever it is. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have like an evening with the Historical Performance Ensemble, which, by the way, is the name of the concert.
Okay.
Where people could come in and have a group of musicians say, hey, this is what we're working on. Here are some of the things that we have to think about if we're going to approach this with historical performance, and then play the piece. And
so bring that to the audience explicitly during the concert.
Yeah,
okay.
So that the audience, whether it's in some cases them or it's me
emceeing
being
the
the MC, right, and
okay.
explaining, this is the kind of stuff that we need to bring to the fore when we talk about this kind of music, and to have a variety of things. And a lot of them will be a little bit later in the historical timeline. That we do a lot of medieval and Renaissance music in the Historical Performance Ensemble, partly because people don't get a lot of opportunities to do that music. And if we have the instruments, we have, and that was my area of research. So we kind of go that way. But there's such a rich abundance of music from the Baroque era and even the early classical era. So I think we're going to hear some of that as well.
Great.
So it'll be an interesting kind of review, as in REVUE.
Sure. Yeah. And it's really interesting to hear that these students who have kind of self-selected to be part of this ensemble are also able to and maybe are being spurred on to perform some older music in other contexts outside of the context of the ensemble itself. So that must be gratifying to you as well, I suppose.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Over the years, we've had a few who have gone on to graduate programs that were specializing in historical performance, and we have one right now who's going to do that.
Great.
So so that's exciting.
All right. So that's going to be kind of live program notes, if you will, kind of potpourri concert on the
I
2nd.
think it'll be fun.
Great.
It's almost kind of like you could say a radio show that's not coming out of a box, but that is sort of happening in front of your eyes.
Sure. Okay.
This will be
great.
Sort of fun.
All right. And then you mentioned, just to make sure we get this in, an April concert as well by the full ensemble, I'm guessing.
Yeah, April 12th at 8 p.m. We're going to be in Hance Chapel.
In the Hance Chapel. Okay, great.
And for a long time, we've anticipated the fact that, we're here in 2026. We've got the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And there's all kinds of early American music that can be explored. And so we decided to do that. Honestly, it was very difficult to kind of narrow down what we were going to do because early America, my goodness, it's everything from, the Spanish colonies to the French colonies to the English-speaking colonies and Native Americans and the African traditions coming over here,
Sure. Diverse from the very beginning, right?
Exactly. And complicated.
And right. Yeah. Fraught as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, how are you going to deal with that? And one of our ensemble members actually had the wonderful idea, what if we did a series of concerts over the next year or so and had it be, early music in the Americas. So we'll start a series of concerts, and the idea behind that would be early music in the Americas.
Okay.
So we might have this one coming up is very much because of the Declaration of Independence. It's really kind of focused on the English-speaking colonies along the eastern seaboard, the 13 original, so on and so forth, to be able to devote some forthcoming concerts next year to the other regions, and I think that'll be really fun to explore.
Nice. So is there, in the colonial sense, I guess, we're thinking of colonial music, is there a clear divide historically between, I don't know, what one might say a royalist position or a colonial position at that moment in time, as far as the music, as far as how some of the music sounded, the approach to music, were there kind of explicitly like, oh, that group that you go see at the tavern on Saturday, they have a colonial outlook on life because they play this kind of music. Was that sort of thing evident at all?
I think, do you mean, for example, the people who were taking part in the American Revolution versus the Tories, or what?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, like did music play a part in defining people's allegiances essentially at that time? Because you maybe couldn't tell them apart on the street, right? But were there differences that were expressed through music?
Yes, and the reason I say yes quickly is because there were plenty of songs that had agenda, that had lyrics with political agendas.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you can kind of see from that. At the same time, there was many of the people in New England came from Western Europe. There was a lot of folk music that was extremely pop. I'm calling it folk music, as ballads and popular dance tunes and all that kind of thing that were brought directly from
the old country,
right?
Yeah.
From the old country, as it were, yeah, and that they were still singing and were still playing, and that would have been shared.
Okay.
From a common sort of regional heritage of some kind.
Sure, that makes sense.
But you have things like, one of the things we're going to sing in April is we're going to do some pieces by Billings, who was a Massachusetts-born composer.
William Billings? Yeah.
William Billings, composer of many hymns that are still sung in various Protestant churches that were written by Billings. And there's one in particular that has, lyrics that you see in the hymnal on Sunday. But the alternate lyrics, which were the first ones that he wrote, were basically, well, let's just say the first line is, "Let tyrants shake their iron rod." So you can see where this is going.
Right.
And it's very much, Revolutionary War, New England, get the troops out of Boston.
Sure. Okay. So he wasn't pulling any punches with those lyrics. Yeah.
Oh, no. No, in fact, there's one verse that names a whole bunch of British generals.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then says, we're going to get rid of these guys or whatever. So
Nice.
it's so exploring some of that, I thought would be interesting.
Great. So that's the April 12th concert.
Yeah,
as
that's
you said.
the April 12th concert.
Wonderful. Look
right.
forward to that. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. The Art Beat a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University.